in like 2 minutes.
One of the judges is sitting there, so if you can find
Yeah, it's my picture.
Oh, got it.
Word document, you like press the word button, and there's like
Cameron, I need to sit there.
I know.
You sit in the middle one.
Yeah, I know.
And they'll like ask you, and then you just click it.
So you have
You
to
still have
flash drive too, though? So you sit there to buy your flash drive too, because I need to.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, you have to buy a flash drive to have one of those. All right.
Good luck to both competitors.
Let's start.
All the judges say
Yeah. So like make like an audible note and like switch it between a card and tag, like next and something like that.
So, is everyone ready?
I reject these fake communities' treatment of women. The idea that Brown decided fairly by tab judge the fact that nationwide there were 13 women out years last year's COC because I refuse to treat debate as just game. I affirm. Part 1 is the framework. The role of judges to promote inclusion of all people in the debate-based judges can no longer consider as part of the game and don't real impact on participants. Since fairness in education can't exist, debate targets some people outside the judges' first duty to make debate inclusive, all sin at all. Caring considered for all children missing from contemporary LDA, uniquely academic activity fostering civil discourse that ought to encourage all children's participation. They add a future witness. Someone terrorizing the child, she would be obligated to act to excuse her silence by saying that she's only responsible for her own classroom. She would lose her job. We are responsible for all students in our collective auditorium. We cannot allow them to be silenced by others. The role of boundaries towards the more productive solution to debate-related inequalities. Productive solutions are the what the oppressed themselves think create actual change rather than just theorize and not realize. And this will without the uniting with pros and actionable counter methodology to invite a fresh debate phase. The uniting alternative must be practical, running a big mindset, all actively contribute to my oppression by making routine impossible. Bryant writes. The left is due to carry out critiques, yet poor proposing realistic alternatives, think abstract means only ignoring how structures have to be remade to be workable alt. Yet this type of revolutionary spirit friendly reactionary and capitalist because they drive people to embrace the reigning ideology rather than undermine it. Next, debate-based inequalities include all other types since first. They undermine the entire point of the activity. There is no way to engage in productive dialogue. Some people are always shut out, polls in one. Speaking your piece means breaking silence and structure connecting power from recognition. Silence is a function of privilege and has chilling effect on political discourse. We need to keep quiet, communities with privilege while speaking out as an alternative voice. As Freer tells us regarding oppression, must first critically recognize its causes. Second, debate-based inequalities apply to all environment performances with regards to argument type Ks. For which theory don't matter, people in there to debate them speaking in unequal space like being tree. The false is dirty force. If no one hears me, don't make sound. Thus, my forever control is the link to all our sins. We need to have debate at all. Part 2, the myth of objectivity. It's just true that national circuit LT is sexist, nor in shows. Female debaters disproportionately receive comments in their clothing and mannerisms, while commentary male debaters seldom touches these issues. The community got certain phrases, ologies that can make women uncomfortable, like using sexual self-synonym for a dominant round. For the community to advance the right direction, it needs to change, and it's not pretty much worse now. This year's Green Hill, a total 2 of 45 judges better on were women, followed by 545 value. There has been a single female top seeder and object reporters bid this year, and only 2 would have been finals and objects bid. But in merits, these seem to not be cause the fundamental problems community norms that define fairnesses, objectivity, and impartiality. All judges have personal biases and preferences, yet debaters constantly praise tab judges and bash those who intervene as inherently gendered, approach mass as neutral. McKinnon writes. Law promotes dominance men as a social group. They're privileging socially male power. These states male that objectivity is its norm reinforcing existing distributions of power that adhere to ideals of fairness like these science and this stance can't see social specificity or its choice to embrace that which reflects the state adopts the standpoint of male power, assuming conditions that pertain among men apply to women as well. That is, that sex and equality does not really exist. Fixed notions of rules-based education don't allow women with different voices to be heard. Gillian notes. Gender differences appear during childhood years and study games. During one study, it seems that boys enjoy legal-based games as much as the game itself. Girls more tolerant attitudes towards rules, more willing to make exceptions. She has conventions that shape the world are different from men's women's construction. The moral problem that one of fear rather than rules tied their moral thinking, understanding of their responsibility, the logical and appearance of relationships with contrast with formal logical fairness. Ignoring these differences and forcing people to fit male-centered norms make it impossible for women to participate as equals in the debate-based Fearance rights. Dominant masculine discourses for women's identities speak hindered on others. Dominant discourses are problematic and male-dominated because women's identities are informed by the masculine structure and plays failure to recognize external pressure structures that frame your identity makes them harder to identify or combat, thus the advocacy. We should be the topic of this general question about nullification, not to the United States criminal justice. The judge treats faith-based and metaphor CJS treat themselves in metaphorical juror and vote affirmative to nullify male-centered norms of fairness and education for the round down rights. People conclude that bears who don't play by the rules, don't win the game, who don't know faith to find the truth of resolution, but to have vigorous meeting of minds, offering a competing methodology moves, committed towards better models of faith that maximize education fairness for everyone. Judges with their ballot update the norms of faith are termed method faith concluded that another ballot makes faith more purposeful rather than exclusionary. Part 3, taking a stand. Voting after act nullification, those the roll ballots first. Metaphors are the only way for women to be heard Hillock right. The metaphor makes the drink more understandable when can't be captured by formalized means. He has marginalized things he has others very different. The dominant groups of experiences. Metaphors, whether they are about stand planning, movement, or journey, are symbolic. Oppressed peoples have little choice to tread lightly. We are not allowed to occupy space the same way as the dominant group. It's once for me to run a quote-unquote topical app. I'm going to be excluded anyway from campus storming to have countless discussion about women's but they're not enough when you see ballots in our favor. Voting for this method gives groups more groups access around meeting the role of the ballot. Second, when the judge nullifies sex norm by affirming they and I are able to take a stand and really do something about an issue instead of just putting 2 polls in 2. The power of discourse is different support from debate because the actor not the OSFG, but the debaters themselves, the folks not the state of debate. Playing game takes away from internal agency, not playing certain agency is doing something, pretending that's when the judge says about nuclear war gets not disconnected from the world and takes away from what you as an individual can do. True liberation means recognizing our own potential to make change right here, right now. This means mind for itself, that's their house agency in the round. Third, the traditional topic wording doesn't let debaters run real advocacy since during nullification currently exists from topics to enforce us spend the status quo instead of critiquing it. This makes it impossible to divorce ourselves from the gender norms we want to speak against within the large debate further because Jay and the parties was impossible for any unique reason to vote after reading harms no matter if we can't have advocated plan to change them. Thus, there is no topical version of the app. Our ability to be critical at all depends on our ability to nullify the topics written. Fourth, voting by advocacy uniquely forces everyone here to recognize that all speech acts are performative. My act directly requires a questioning of the rules and norms that contribute to my oppression post-act rights. Rules validate force speakers to carry their performances implications and have throughout every advocacy has some pre-gun implications and pre-gun big force engagement. The entire point of having maybe should break and infuriating cycle of not each to investigate greater meaning spin thing to outdate mantra of the end justify the needs made in this bit and then during the granted then 1 or 2 rounds begin to radically vote in and out of ground. Fifth, voting backwards instead of just acknowledging a return to normal is key, and that all. We are not so cynical as to see the power of a single ballot, a discussion inclusion enormous amount of dozens of students raise awareness to change minds who no students carry the message to future rounds are back there. Vote teams are away to future career paths. If prevents even a single microaggression directed at a student or lower standard constant activity, just a bit makes a world of a difference for one person. Thus I affirm.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
So this Brian evidence you read is that the negative has to propose a concrete alternative. What does that mean? What do I have to do to meet this argument?
What do you do? Like, just propose like.
Yeah, like, what does my counter method have to do to meet this argument?
Be like tangible, like.
Wait, so you have a metaphor. How's that tangible?
No, so like the metaphor is something that the judge actually does and fulfills when they sign their ballot. That is something tangible.
So what is a constraint? Like it has to just appeal to the judge?
No, I'm not saying you have to appeal to the judge. But if you're gonna say like, oh, everybody should just change their minds about sexism, like that's not a tangible law. Or like we should like deconstruct some sort of.
So what is the reason why signing the ballot app is good and absent the handed in all evidence?
Because well, like all of the.
Yeah, so none of the other arguments, like, for example, like specifically, like the judge signing their name app and voting for you is specifically good.
No, so the argument is that throughout the entirety of the AC, the act of nullifying is an act of affirmation and standing with me in terms of nullifying against objective.
Let's go to advocacy. What does it mean? Like, what do you defend? I just want to be like clear about it. Like, what do you mean by like nullify what?
So like nullify the idea of objectivity in debate.
Wait, what is? Can you explain that?
So like the idea that any person can make any type of objective decision, like devoid of any sort of like outside influences, is just flawed and problematic. There is no such thing as objectivity. We can never have fairness. So the judge nullifies
No,
that
I'm not talking
fact.
about fairness. I'm talking about what is objectivity in terms of what you are criticizing.
So that's like what I.
I'm not going to read like a theory argument. I just want to know what this argument means.
So the idea that anyone can make a decision absent outside influences and absent biases and hierarchies means that there's no such thing as objectivity.
Okay, so you nullify, in your advocacy text, you say vote app to nullify male-centered militant fairness in education. Why are fairness in education like male-centered?
So that's coming out of the harms evidence.
Sure, so let's go to that.
Okay, so like the McKinnon evidence talks about how traditionally like legal structures and the idea
Wait,
of
why is that applicable to like fairness in education?
well, the entire like construction of like what is fair and like what is good has been generated by like the patriarchal structure.
Wait, why? What's the warrant?
So
That seems like an empirical claim. I don't think you're providing a
So the argument in McKinnon and Gilligan is that males have dominated the entire development of like when you say I'm not being fair, you're saying that I'm
not asking about fairness in education. That's not my question. I'm asking how is this argument, what are you criticizing if I'm why is it male-centered, debate absent fairness in education?
Wait, why is debate male-centered?
Yeah, absent fairness in education. These impacts that constrain what arguments we can read.
Wait, I'm a little bit confused by your question.
Never mind. Let's go to the role of the ballot. So what do I need to do to meet the role of the ballot?
Propose a counter methodology.
So I need to specifically talk about women's oppression, or can I talk about a different form?
You can talk about another form, but it should be related to debate-related qualities.
Oh, that's fine. Order is one off. Is everybody good? One off case? Yeah. Is everybody good now? What do you want to say? Just top down. The basic problem with the app is that she and her usage of experience as a ground for politics turns the entirety of the case. The use of experience as an unquestioned ground against objectivity reifies identity as ahistorical and static. All women's identities are not the same. They are all equitable, and all political advocacies derived just from the fact that identity. Scott 1. Experience has just been helped to legitimize the critique of the false claim to objectivity. Traditional accounts part of the project has been unmasked claims to objectivity. This has been achieved by providing documentation of women. How do we authorize the new done with the possibility of all the objectivity has been answered, appealing to experience as transparent, attributing indisputable authenticity of women's experiences to establish contribute to women's identity to people with agency. It is also to utilize the identity of women. To literally equate with the power personal with the political for the living experience of women is seen as directly to the corruption. This turns keys for 4 reasons. A, the app rhetoric is structurally the same as the way most rhetoric that undergirds the exclusion of women in the debate community. 1, numerous equations. Successful women who do not agree or do not confirm with the dominant image of how women are supposed to be are degender claiming and do not believe after the exceptions of the rules of what it means to be women. Further, this is specific and historically located. The way that the exclusion debate has been constructed is varied from year to year, and over the course of activity 10 years ago, the perception of women debate was that it only brings stark arguments. Now there's a strong association between feminist position and women debate. The app reaffirms the idea that there's a certain type of debate only women can understand, that Christine Korsgaard can actually make counter arguments. Women like those that are reception to was like Gilligan. The card supercharges this argument. The app, like my opponent's experience, but you should drop her because she's pretending that it is general. My teammates and my coach would agree that debate is sexist, but none of those issues understand the meaning of the rule. The only way she can win the round at this point if she doubles down on the idea that her account must be the same for every other woman that she's claiming to speak for, which is empirically false. B, the framing kills any possibility of solidarity amongst the multiplicity of women. Those who are constructed as women and those who identify as women, women disagrees with the app. The app is saying she's not really a woman, she's not a hard woman, she's part of the masculinity. The reality is that women identity is complicated. Masculinity is complicated. There's some 1-to-1 relationship with one identity is one opinion. This is systematically exclusionary and in real life with the possibility of networks between the press and the debate. C, the strong and selective that establishes her identity and experience and knowledge is demonstrating your possibility of actually engaging critique. She seems that entirely sure about what sexism means, who a woman is, and what they think. She's already thinking herself against the critique and consultation. Any attempt at questioning your methodology is part of the link, because that means by denying your experiences are key, but they're not they are questionable. One of the problems in solving questions that we do not actually access the ways in which experience are shaped by power, which is the app reaffirms Scott 2. It is precisely this kind of appeal to experience uncontestable evidence that weakens critical thrusts of difference. They take the evidence that identities of those experiences be documented, naturalize their difference, locate resistance that serves as the discursive construction of read by ages as here. When experience is taken as the origin of knowledge, the vision of the individual subject becomes the evidence of the bedrock of evidence. Questions about the constructed nature of experience subjects are constituted as different in the first place about how one's vision is structured about language. The evidence of experience becomes evidence for difference rather than a way of exploring how difference is established. D. Having a strategy of essentialism for the sake of political issues is incredibly destructive to the movement as a whole. Is it critical to recognize that marginalized identities are in fact sites of cultural contestation? Butler. It would be perilous at the historian would call for suppressing a particular identity, since that would be such identity to a reactionary constitution in the face of silencing or gender, race, or sexual minority identities. So reactionary politics forces it important to be able to articulate them to exist on the sites of valuable cultural contestation. It is imperative to assert identities at the same time that is crucial for to integrate the operations with their constitution. But what I'm calling for is a double move that insists on the identity and the subjugation of identity in terms of a constitution once the exclusionary powers. This seems to be the necessary and contingent place of identity. Also, voting for me is key because you need to put your best into this framing. My argument is not that we should address sexism or that women's experience are unimportant or this is the wrong form. It is only that the way that she's constructing her experience creates an equation about identity, experience, and knowledge and ideology that is incredibly solution. Also, this argument happens to me. People like the people like the brown body, for example, are excluded from debate space, or there are presuppositions that happen in the frame debate. The problem is that I do not say that this equates to all the people. For example, my experiences are not related to every single person. Instead, we should understand that there's a dialectical relation between the individual experience and general knowledge. That both experiences and claims can be questioned and communicated between each other, but neither is indeterminate, neither is an attributed to be possessed particularly or objectively as Butler. It's conscious, but there needs to be an apt double movement where we acknowledge that identities are socially constructed at the same time we acknowledge their culture and political meaning. Thus, the alternative text is to do the affirmative but combative question, the universal principles of the accounts for generalize and move to the concrete other instead of describing her experience to every other identity group. These point of views reflect the perfect rationalization of the marginalized point of view. Both are integral to solving oppression. Beneby. The integration of the generalized and concrete other is essential. The generalized other is a endowment with moral rights and escapable sense of justice. The concrete other enjoys the view of every person as a unique individual with history. There is a commitment to understand that every individual is being worthy of moral sight. This generates competition. The abstract from these perspective of our actual experience will be the foundation of any of the deliberation and built up the generalized other. This ignores the concrete other. The other people who actually their experiences contradict the experience that they use for this part of the AC. This AC assumes an essentialism or all black, queer, and women's experience are the same and ignores any person whose perspective disagrees with the larger narrative of the oppressed group. This means no herbs in any attempt to pervert further the links of the debate, but they're using their performance to co-op and dislodge the insidious ways in which they obviously justified and to smooth the distinction between the concrete and generalized other. Only the NC method determines what is good via bad, the method of the view of the Beneby arguments relative like the AC's rule that only once we should reject the publicity, but way that we should do that. And the NC's method also starts from the standpoint of the oppressed, but including the universal's key, Beneby 2. In justifying claims of recognition, minority groups have to enter into political contestation. Those who operate recently assume that all claims are justifiable where submitted to discourse. Treat others and equal to whom I disavow without criminalistic pretensions. The myths can be said to be valid because they're articulated by groups in the history, oppression, and resolution. The recent history of politics is the protection of the identity of a regular group. Now, on case. Over your case. Reforms never happen despite theory because the bipolitical state has risen above traditional modes of control. Movements will never work if the state co-ops or movement invisible committee 1. In the United States, there are more prisoners in department. Public space is covered with cameras only. Surveillance possible. Display on sector. List of substances circulate from the department to department. Their social space is military marketing ties and charter have been here authority to read and submit whispers and micro legislation. Meanwhile, policy the police has been taking shootings. Micropolitics and performance of resistance do nothing to prevent us from solving pernicious systems of oppression. Generalism from your act fails to make things more visible. Committee 2. The radical finding themselves as a producer of actions, discourse, fabricates of purely quantity of religion history, seeing that are contradicting whether it's Russian, French, Russian, or Tunisian. Every revolution results in shock between an act and the storming of a prison. The general situation, not the medical added addition of separate acts of the revolution, is damage to oneself to judge for performance, where it's a matter of actualizing one's radical identity for human performative. Resistance means either hopelessly isolated, does nothing, or succeeds, and according to hopefully I reject allowing the bipolitical state to easily predict and eliminate any shapes it might have. In this bill, Committee 3. Performance was claiming intensity does not engender. Whether it's an issue, it's not whether it's cheap, but whether it be contagious. The stagnating vision is an abstract machine which the state's body's justice and when bodies change to failure, pass through the molecular phenomena, stasis, systematic clinging to the temporal evolution. This argument is not that your performance is bad. My argument is that you will be co-opted by the debate committee because they're the ones that are all profiled and have the ability to determine what things is right. When you make performance arts, these social just get co-opted because the opinion communities are really strong. This is mirrored, for example, by the fact that the state's bipolitical now the line by line that they see on the Bryan argument first. The NC is not an abstract question. It's a question of how we. I accept that we need to solve things like debate issues. It's just a question of how we do that methodology in the first place. Second, critique comes on a higher layer. We cannot form concrete alternatives if we have an idea of what we're going to do. Otherwise, we'll just always fail, and that will never solve the issue. Which means that takes that on. Third, you should give me new response to the argument you tries to apply to the critique. I was very unclear what you meant in cross-examination. For example, a metaphor seemed very abstract to me, but I don't know what she thinks is abstract, which means that argument should not apply. Now, the next argument I'm going to go to is the McKinnon card. The argument here is that the fundamental promise community that defines fairness and objectivity, first that's an empirical claim with an empirical word. Just because people have biases and preferences doesn't mean that we are going to hear this whole and end all is fairness in education. That is a not warranted claim. The second argument is she says that people conceptualize things like a tab judge and things like that, but that's also an empirical claim with that empirical word, which obviously does not apply here because she's already assuming something's now. The next argument she says ignoring these differences and forcing people to fit in middle gender synonyms. That's exactly what I do not do. My argument is that we should relate and understand people's identity as in their own. You cannot describe that, for example, your experience are attributable to every single other single person, which means that you can never solve. Now the next reasons are she's a reason to vote for, but I co-opt all those reasons, and any of those reasons, those are reasons to vote for the negative template. My methodology is better than hers.
Is everyone ready? What does your methodology do?
So, let's explain how the K works. So the argument is that the way that the problem with the affirmative is that you say, for example, that women have these issues and attributing it to every single person is bad.
Okay, wait, where does the AC attribute it to every single person?
You literally say, for example, the opening thing that only 13 women, for example, were at
that's
TOC.
That's like a claim. About, like, that's a fact.
I can point to every single argument of the app if you would like me to do that.
Okay, let's talk about the alternative. So what is the alternative do?
The alternative is to do the affirmative, but do not talk about oppression in the way that you say, like conceptualizing your experience to every single other, for example, identity group that you talk about. Instead, we should reflect these views, i.e., like the concrete other, for example.
So what is the concrete other?
That is like someone who is subjugated.
Okay, so like anyone who is subject. So like I would be a concrete.
Sure, if you identify yourself as one.
Okay.
I do
so
not
then
say you
why
are.
is like me not sharing my experience an example of negating?
Sorry, what?
So, like, you say that we should listen to the concrete other under your definition of concrete
No,
other. I am a concrete
That's
other.
not my argument. Well, also, my argument is I'm also a concrete other in the same way. But,
Okay.
So that would not be a unique argument. The second, my argument is that no, your argument, what you do when you are a concrete other, you are saying that we can conceptualize this to every single other person is bad because you assume some characteristic of them that is not applicable.
Okay,
you cannot just
why
assume,
do I assume that, like, everybody else follows the same method?
when you say that, for example, like, women are excluded and we need to do this, you're using your experience to apply generally to every single other person that is a woman.
Okay, wait, so if I say, like, racism is bad, or, like, people experience racism, does that, like, totalize, like, the population? Can I make a claim, like, debate is sexist without totalizing
That's not
women?
my argument. My argument is not that you cannot say debate is sexist. It's when you say, like, for example, your personal experience has dictated that you believe that certain claims are true. You cannot describe that to every other single person in your identity.
Why can't I just be speaking for
That's the
myself?
entirety.
Wait, so the point of jury nullification is that it's like an individual basis, right?
My argument is not that it's based off just a metaphor example. It's the entirety of the case that
Wait,
plays.
so but I'm defending the metaphor of jury nullification, which
It's
is
the
about
way that
specific instances, right?
It's the way that you categorize, for example, the oppression you talk about. The jury nullification arguments probably do have more links in there too.
Wait, why?
Wait, my argument is it's a question of your performance links to my arguments. The way that you ascribe oppression in that way is bad.
So wait, should people not talk about their experiences?
No, my point is that yes, we should talk about experience, but we should not ascribe that to every single identity group. For example, I recognize that, for example, my identity group might be oppressed in some way, but I cannot attribute my oppression to those other people. That's the whole point of the
But so
alternative.
wait, well, I'm still like, why does the AC attribute my impression to
You
everyone?
say, for example, all these sexist norms are all harming women. My argument is that no, that's not applicable to every single woman. You cannot attribute that claim to every single
But
person.
why can't I say
My
that
argument is
these
my
are
coach-
harming me?
My coach, yes, you can. That's what you do not do that. You attribute to every single person that is a woman or that.
I say that the judge should nullify in this round. Why is that like not like me standing up and saying this is
My
why?
argument is the way the
I don't say
performance,
they
the
nullify
performance that
every
you,
round.
the way that you do it, the rhetoric of the part 1, part 2, and part 3. It's not just about part 3, for example. And I'd say my metaphor is like the alternative is a better advocacy.
Put this down so you're all. Okay. 32 left. I'm not reading any cards. So I'm going to be starting on the AC and then going is everybody. ACK. Ready? There is a big mischaracterization of the app. The entire point of objectivity is the fact that we have to look at things in a subjective manner. There are no objective claims that can be made. That is what the AC is saying. Further, I'm thinking from my social location, and we should not tell someone they cannot say things like sexism exists. I'm saying sexism exists in me. This is what I want to do as an individual about it. Go to first off the overview about the state coopting one. He links, if he is reading, saying that we do the same thing as the app, which is include other movements, he links in just as hard as I do. Two turn, I wanted people to notice this movement. I want other readers to read these types of positions to get the movement out. Three turn, performances help to ground our identities and ground our experiences. So that's good. So that's good. Other people who have to get in seeing that. Go to the solvency, actually go to the harms. Start with the McKinnon evidence. Extend McKinnon. The fundamental problem is the community norms define fairness, objectivity, and partiality. Mayor's praise, captures this inherently gender approach to math as neutral by pretending socially male power doesn't reinforce existing power distributions. This literally says we need to point out the fact that sexism exists. Not saying there's a specific way that everybody experiences sexism, but it's just the fact that we need to point out that objectivity is the problem. This de-links through the case, and there's no student objectivity, but it's for Brandt's evidence. Ignoring differences and forcing women to fit male-centered norms makes equal participation impossible in male dominant communities. Women's identities are always informed by mass construction places. Turns the A point of the case. He talks about how, sometimes women will just conform to things that are stereotypically masculine, but the whole point is that our identities are informed by the power structure in place. Anyone who doesn't identify with that power structure that is currently in place is subjugated. That is who I am speaking for. Semi-advocacy. This says that we don't make find the truth of resolution went down, so the judge asks the juror to nullify sexist modes of debate. This is talking about jury nullification. This is uniquely beneficial because the idea of jury nullification that we're speaking on an individual case-by-case basis. I am asking the judge to nullify in this round means I don't live because I'm just talking about myself individual. This is what I want judges to do in this round. I'm not saying judges do this in every round, and every time they have a woman, I'm saying this is what I want them to help like my oppression. So go to the solvency. He says he's just co-opting it, but Cindy pulls an evidence when judges nullify norms and I can take stand instead of just pretending to perpetuate the actors and debaters themselves, not the government playing game, take away from REC's debaters, the solvency evidence. I am literally saying as myself, this is what I'm going to do in this performance. I'm speaking from literally my own identity. This is what I want the judges to do. Then extend the handed evidence that voting for my performance will now turn to normalize key. A single ballot can change the life of people in the room and never know until we have the discussion what change will come. This takes at the point of the overview statement how we're not going to do anything, but go to the K, starting on the top. 1. No link, I speak to my social location, that is very evident, but 2, turn this shuts down discussion. If we can never encourage people to talk about their experiences, then we never have discussion at all. 3, turn this is a reason to use more identities and for more people to read things like this affirmative, not a reason to shut out the discussion. And 4, the point of justification is, again, subjectivity. That's the point of the app saying objectivity, and it's objective claims is bad. There's really no link. Then 5th, by this logic, we can never say things like racism or sexism are objectively bad, but that's probably a problematic idea. Off of the A point, you can cross-apply the Brandt's evidence. Off the B point, he says like he'll start between women, but no, I'm saying that literally anyone who does not identify with the power structures in place can identify with my movement, and then he can read different versions of this happened, their own round. This is something I'm saying for myself. Off the slide evidence again, you talk about the essentially all of the points are saying the same thing. Go to the alt. First perm. Do the AC as part of his movement. There is no reason as to why they should be competitive. If I am a subjugated other, then listening to me in this round is listening to my experience as part of the firm, because literally there's no reason they're competitive. We can listen to other people and other types of behavior. This specifically, what I'm saying for my individual to turn by this logic, we will never encourage people to speak up. I should not be silenced in this room. I should not be silenced. The idea of saying this is how I experience depression in this room, because that's encouraged no subjugated other to speak up. Under his role, nobody's going to come forward. 3, it's an impossible word to say that I have to specify a type of experience that everybody has. So no, I'm not speaking for everyone, just speaking for myself. It'd be impossible to talk about depression if I had to talk about the type of depression everyone experienced.
Overview, I would flow that on the K, then the K down, and then the AC. there maybe? Hold on.
Okay, could you say where you're starting again?
Just the top. What's the overview?
Is it the overview arguments you read on the app? Or
Yeah,
a new
just on the
overview?
K.
A new overview. Okay, I got you now.
Everybody good?
The overview here is you have misunderstood the entirety of the critique. My argument is not that you should not talk about your oppression. My argument is that you should not just generalize your type of oppression to every single other person in your identity group. You misunderstood the first argument is no link because you only talk about yourself. I'll get to that when we get to the AC and the links. The second argument you make is that term because we can have this discussion. Yes, this discussion is good. My argument is that yes, this discussion is good, but you cannot be able to generalize that argument. Those are all the case terms that you have conceded. Now, the third argument you make is that it's my evidence and we need to include more people in our discussion. No, my argument is that when you say, for example, that my oppression applies to every single other group, that is totalizing in itself because you assume certain characteristics of the people that you were trying to mask the person which way always networks. For example, you literally say in the last speech that if people identify with your subject in history, then you can look at the same arguments. That is exactly the problem. The fact that you say that people can just identify with your group is a problem because you try to say place your for example your experience in the debate space. Like the fact that maybe Sarah has been discriminated against is not a way that you can inform that to every other single woman in the debate space. For example, my argument is very specific that in the 8 point that for example my coaches don't describe the same way that for example Sarah does. If people do not have that same describing, that is a disadvantage to the F method. The next argument you make, the fourth argument is that gender implications objectivity. You conceded that for example, the alternative versus a pick out of the app. I just do not do that, which that means I have all the advantages of jury nullification because I can see that jury nullification is a good thing. So I just pick out of the fact that you say that we should generalize all the other people, which means that you get no disadvantage. The fifth argument is about something about racism being problematic. Yes, I can say racism is problematic. This argument is absolutely absurd. If you did not understand that, you should not vote of it. And it was just defense at best, which means I have a risk of opportunity. In the case extended the first argument, they Scott one, the use of experiences that unquestioned ground against objectivity reimplies identities as ahistorical and static. All women's identity are the same and equitable. But when you say that, for example, that Y identity describes every single outside very key. Now let's go for the specific links. They extend the 8 point that the aphoretic is structurally the same as to the rhetoric that undergirds the exclusion of women. The really good link here is their example. It was the Gilligan card, for example. They tagged the Gilligan card as that fixed notions of fairness and education don't allow women with different views to be heard. That literally ascribes your conception of fairness and education to every single woman that exists in the debate community. Not that just specifically to you, which means that you definitely linked to the critique, and it was in the speech shop, which means that you probably should respond to this argument. The next argument from the 8 point is that you should drop her because she's pretending that it is general to every single person. Not everyone agrees with her position. Not every single woman would agree with the position. That's just empirically proven. For example, my coach does not agree with your position, which means that you probably cannot just say that every single woman would agree with your position. Now the B point is it kills any framing for any solidarity among the most women, which kills your movement because people do not agree with your position. Just because you say that some people should identify, you just say that people. Your response to this argument is that people can identify with your movement if they want to. The argument is that when you try to generalize that to all and every woman, that is the reason why you can never solve the argument. The C point is 100% conceded. The argument here is that this is the strong submission. She tries to identify identity and experience. The fact that she is a woman, and that is a reason why she's a precedent. For example, the debate space. That is a bad thing. And I'm not saying that yes, you can talk about your oppression. You should just not talk about in a generalist way. You can say that this got you evidence, which is a impact framing argument for why. When you say something like uncontestable evidence, for example, you attribute to those people. You are totalizing those people because it is a card. I wonder if questioning that experience in the first place. The card is very good. You should call for it here. Now the next argument is that D point. Or sorry, we'll skip the D point. Now the next argument you concede is that voting for B is key because we need to push against this framing. That is a active reason why net benefit to be a disadvantage to the permutation. My argument is that yes, I also have some discrimination. I have been discriminated in the debate community, for example, for the color of my skin, but I do not describe that to every single other, for example, who is Indian or something that I identify with, or for example, that is male. I do love the way the affirmative, which is a net benefit to my arguments, and the reason why you cannot perm the permanent because it's my performance. You cannot perm my performance. It is in that way. Now, next argument you concede is an alternative. The debate. Let's go to the alternative. The first argument is that you perm, but you conceded that you cannot perm because that's argument underneath the benefit argument that there's no perms because any attempt to perm further the link because inside the critique because they're using their performance to co-opt and dislodge the insidious ways. That is a reason to drop them because she's trying to co-opt my movement and the way performance argument, which means that she's severing from her position. The next argument she makes us know we need to speak with this position and talk about oppression. I allow you to speak for oppression. That's exactly what I do when I identify that something's like I've been oppressed in the debate community. We just don't do it in the way that you talk about. The third argument seems impossible to do this because there's some sort of constraint. No, it's not. You just have to talk about your own individual experiences instead of generalizing it to. Now I just need to win the alternative. The extended alternative text is due to the affirmative and combat oppression through, for example, the generalized and concrete of the. She has conceded that is a pick out of the app, which means that you cannot permit unless you, for example, the permutation is specific to the pick part of the plan, which means that there's no permutations on that because she cannot pick out of something. She cannot perm something I picked out of, which means that it's an enumeration. That's another Benedict one argument that the integration of both are necessary to solve any oppression because we didn't understand. But when we both are concrete other, you cannot describe it to every single other that exists, i.e., the perfect rational agent or any someone else. That is bad because you are assuming certain things about them. Then extended competition argument that it was conceded that the abstracts from the respective are actual experience with that foundation, but you ignore the concrete other, the other people who are oppressed in the debate space. those women in the debate space. Now, the next argument you make, you concede is a benefit to argue that the NC method also starts from the same point of Christ, but including other people's key. That is conceded reason and a disadvantage to the permutation, which means that should outweigh your argument. The only argument for the permutation that is net beneficial is that we can talk about, but obviously that's not a net benefit to the perm. That is not a reason. My argument said the fact that you exclude people, exclude certain discussion is bad. Now, I'm not going for the overview. This argument just gets access to the performance arguments. Your turns are nonsensical because there are some reasons that you get access to those arguments in the first place, which means that I call up all the performance arguments. Now, let's talk about the links on the debate. She tries to make a bunch of no-link arguments, but it is very clear that she links. The first link, I will go through the line by line of the case. The first link, she says that she rejects the debate community and their treatment of women. That is exactly the problem with the critique. You say that, for example, you would discriminate, but when you say you should reject the debate community on treatment of all women, that is the exact link. The next link that I'm talking about was the cross-application of the Jillian argument. When you say fixed notions of fairness in education discriminate against all women, that is obviously something that you were generalizing to all people. You should not let her get out of this link argument when her very speech and her rhetoric in the app is saying that it is applicable to all women. Yes, you talk about, for example, your specific experiences, but when you allow those specific experiences to go to every single other person, that is bad. Your next argument you make is that you extend the Fibonacci evidence that we don't need any gender norms. No, that's exactly what I am rejecting. I say we should solve this just in a different way. My methodology is comparatively better. The next argument you make is you extend the jury nullification arguments. None of these are unique. I pick out of that part. I pick the counterpoint is part of the jury nullification part. I just pick out of part of the performance part that she talks about. She tries to extend the Hanan evidence that this supercharged argument. My argument is that the valid is a good thing. You should vote negative to endorse my methodology that solves better for the opponents. The round is very clear. You do not get it, so that is the reason why you vote negative.
The order is going to be ACK. Is everyone ready?
The biggest problem is that the K only matters if he wins the link debate, and he spent only a minute of last speech on all of the no-link work I did on the AC. So, remember, the entire point of the AC is to reject the notion of objectivity, that we can have an objective claim. The point of the AC is that we look at things in a subjective manner on a case-by-case basis. That means there is no generalization coming out of the extending canon evidence. The fundamental problem is community norms find fairness, objectivity, impartiality, fake praises, to have judges inherently gender approach that is masked as neutral. The idea of saying something is neutral and objective is the problem, and the argument he keeps referencing, he says that the Gilligan evidence is the problem, but the Gilligan text reads that the fixed notions of rules of fairness education don't allow women with different views to be heard. I am not saying that everyone experiences this. I am saying that women who do not adhere to the dominant structures experience this type of oppression. That is the point of the AC. He is severely mischaracterizing this. I am speaking from my suspicion about people who identify the same way I do, off of the advocacy. Off of the point about jury nullification, all he says is that, oh, he has picked to be gossip, but he fails to recognize this is a no-link argument. Extend that we should be the topic of this general question about nullification, not between the United States criminal justice and the judge treats faith-based metaphor. CGS treat themselves as a metaphorical jury and vote for to nullify. I am not saying, extend the point that, one, I'm not asking to nullify in every single round, just this round. That means that I'm not applying my experience to other people, and to the entire point of jury nullification is that we look at things in a subjective manner on a case-by-case basis. The point is that there are not rules, there are not laws that apply to everyone. That is what jury nullification says. There's zero link to the K. Go to the solvency. Extend the Polson 2 evidence. When judges nullify norms, they and I take a stand instead of pretending to inform and debate. The actors are the debaters themselves, not the government playing the game to a different agency. As debaters, simply pretend the judge saying not just something. The point of this evidence saying that the point of my performance is for me to take a stand in this individual round. I am doing something as an individual with the judge saying this is what I want you to do to help fight my oppression. This is yet a no-link argument, reason why you can't vote on the K. So go to the K. Starting on the perm debate. He says that it's a pick, so I can't perm, but he doesn't understand the nuances of perm. Extend the perm, we do the app, and then incorporate my emotion, my narrative, as part of listening to the subjugated other. I am a subject other, and his interpretations to extend. So this means that if he says that my experience is not part of his alternative, then that is exclusionary. He cannot have a movement that doesn't listen to the subjugated other if my movement is not part of it. That's problematic because
points and the second turn that by this logic we can never have any sort of movement. He's always excluding people. Go to the top of the link debate. He's doing not enough work on the bottom point to send the fifth point on the no link to me. By this logic, couldn't say that racism, that I'm pretty sure I can say that there is sex and sexism exists. If I'm not able to say that, then we can't discuss about racism or sexism. I'll extend the second point, the turn about how this means we can never have discussion. If you shut people out every time they try and talk about their experiences, then nobody ever will. This is a disadvantage of doing the negative because he is trying to incorporate all experiences, but that means just shutting me out. Thus I affirm.
Can you email me the
It's going to be password protected, but I can type it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Neil, can I get the all that? Well, can you just actually just show me the game? You're going to that's fine.